My name is Sarah Elizabeth Waters, and my story begins at an ending. The final hearing was a blur of muffled sounds, the judge's voice a distant hum. A sharp rap of the gavel echoed like a gunshot, and just like that, my 22-year marriage was officially over. I stood up on legs made of hollow bones, the courthouse floor feeling like shifting sand beneath my feet. I walked out into a barren November afternoon where the gray sky pressed down on my chest with a physical weight. I could not draw a full breath. In that moment, my future was not an open road, but a door slammed shut and locked. I was 51 years old, utterly alone, and terrified in a way I had never known. The man I had built my life with, the father of my children, my partner through illness and triumph, was now a legal stranger. We had already lived apart for a year of stilted conversations and lawyer letters, but this made it a permanent fact etched into public record. The finality of it was a cold stone in my gut. The drive home was a dangerous act of muscle memory, my vision saltwater blurred. Home was now a silent house of ghosts. Every room held a memory that cut me. The couch where we held each other and cried after his cancer diagnosis, where I promised him we would fight it together. The kitchen table where we planned our daughter's wedding, his handwriting next to mine on the caterer's list, his laugh booming as we argued over the merits of chocolate versus vanilla cake. The patio where we grilled burgers every Sunday in summer, the air filled with laughter and charcoal smoke, and the easy silence of two people who knew each other's rhythms by heart. Now there was only a heavy, suffocating stillness. It was the silence of abandonment, the quiet of profound failure. I went straight to my room, and curled into a tight ball on my side of the bed, the side I had slept on for 2 decades. I did not move for hours, the dusk turning to full night, the darkness feeling less like an absence of light and more like a living thing that had settled in to claim me. I stared at the empty space beside me, a vast continent of cold sheets, and wondered how a person simply continues to exist when the architecture of their life has collapsed. The weeks that followed were a gray procession of survival motions. I would wake with a jolt, for a single, blessed second forgetting. Then reality would crash in, a tidal wave of loss that left me gasping on the shore of another day I did not want. I went to work at the library where I had been a children's librarian for decades. I smiled at the toddlers during story hour, my voice singing about brave little engines and hungry caterpillars while my inner world was a desolate crater. I would shelve books in the quiet aisles, my fingers tracing the familiar spines of fairy tales, and find my cheeks wet for no reason I could explain to a patron. My friends tried, God bless them. Casseroles appeared on my doorstep with sweet notes. Invitations for coffee and girls' nights filled my inbox, but I was a ghost among them. Their happy marriages felt like exhibits in a museum I was no longer allowed to enter. Their well-meaning platitudes, "You're better off," "Time heals all wounds," "God has a better plan," sounded like a language from a distant country I could not comprehend. Their kindness felt like a spotlight on my brokenness, and I began to dread it. My adult children, my beautiful son and daughter, were wrapped in their own grief and a confusing loyalty. Their calls became careful, curated things. They tiptoed around the elephant in the room, their voices strained with the effort of not choosing sides, though I never asked them to. I heard the distance, the unspoken question of what I had done to make their father leave. The loneliness deepened, becoming a chasm that separated me from every person I had ever loved. I stopped answering the phone. The casseroles went untouched until they spoiled, their creamy contents a metaphor for my own decaying spirit. The silence in the house grew thicker, and I began to prefer it. It was honest. It matched the void inside me. I would sit for hours in the living room chair, watching the light move across the floor, feeling myself turning into a piece of furniture, inert and gathering dust. The darkest night came in late January. A brutal ice storm had knocked out the power, and I sat huddled by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket I had knitted for him during his chemotherapy. The wind howled like a wounded animal, and the flames cast frantic, dancing shadows on the walls. I stared into that fire, and for the first time I truly understood how a person could simply stop. The fatigue was not in my bones, but in my soul. It seemed a logical, quiet conclusion to the pain, to just let the cold and the dark take over. The thought held no drama, only a profound weariness. I was not crying. I was simply empty, a vessel drained of all hope. And in that absolute emptiness, a sound broke through. It was not a voice, not anything so mystical. It was the shattering crack of a massive ice-laden branch breaking from the old oak in the backyard. It crashed down, taking a power line with it in a shower of blue sparks that briefly, brilliantly illuminated the entire frozen yard like a flashbulb from God. The violence of it startled me back into my body. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. In the aftermath, with the blue light seared into my vision, a thought, clear and sharp as the ice, formed. This is how it happens. Something heavy breaks and everything goes dark. But as I watched the sparks fade against the blackness, another thought, quieter but insistent, followed. But the branch was dead. The tree is still alive. I sat there shivering until dawn, that simple image holding me. The tree was still alive. Its roots were deep. It had survived the storm, even as it shed a dead part of itself. I was not a theologian, but in that moment, it felt like the first prayer I had uttered in months. I am still here. The next morning, in the brittle sunlight that glittered off a world encased in glass, I made a decision. It was not a grand resolution to find joy or love myself. It was a pathetic, tiny act of defiance against the void. I would take one shower. I would get dressed in real clothes, not the sweatpants that had become my uniform. I would drive somewhere, anywhere, that was not this house or my workplace. I ended up at a community center I passed every day on my way to the library. A small, faded sign in the window caught my eye. New Beginnings, a support group for women navigating life after divorce. The words New Beginnings seemed like a cruel joke, a slogan for a vacation I never wanted to take. But something made me park the car. I sat in the freezing lot for 20 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my breath fogging the windows. Walking through that door was the hardest thing I had ever done. Harder than the chemotherapy support group I'd attended with my ex, harder than burying my parents. It felt like a public admission of my greatest shame, a white flag waved at the world. But before we continue, I want to extend a very special invitation to you. Subscribe the channel and leave a like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories, and comment down below which city you are watching us from right now. Let's continue. The room was a fluorescent-lit rectangle with folding chairs arranged in a hesitant circle. There were other women there. A young woman in her 30s, her eyes red raw, clutching a wad of tissues like a lifeline. A woman my age with a posture of such fierce anger she seemed to vibrate with it, her jaw clenched tight. An older woman with beautifully coiffed silver hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her hands perfectly still in her lap. Our facilitator, Marie, had a calm, grounding presence. She didn't offer easy answers. She simply said, "Your story is safe here. Your pain is welcome here. You are not alone here." When it was my turn to speak, my name stuck in my throat. "I'm Sarah," I finally whispered, the sound strange to my own ears. "And my divorce was final 2 months ago. I think I'm dying." And for the first time, I said it out loud, the truth I had been swallowing down. I am so very, very angry. And I am so lost, I don't know how to find a spoon in my own kitchen some days. The young woman across from me, the one with the ravaged eyes, reached over and wordlessly placed a box of tissues in my lap. That small, unasked-for act of unseen understanding was the first thread thrown across my chasm. Someone saw me. Someone, in her own pain, recognized mine. I kept going back every Thursday night. It was not an instant cure. It was messy and ugly and profoundly human. We raged against our ex-husbands, the legal system, the unfairness of it all. We wept for our broken families, our shattered security, the dreams we had to bury. We sat in silence when words failed. We shared the absurd horrors, the gut punch of dividing up Christmas ornaments, the surrealism of creating an online dating profile at 52, the financial terror of a solitary tax return. I learned my all-consuming anger had a name. It was grief. Grief for the life I planned, the partner I lost, the future I pictured, the woman I used to be. Marie called it ambiguous loss, the grief for someone who is still alive but gone from you, and giving it a name made it feel slightly more manageable, like a wild animal that could at least be seen in a cage. In that circle of worn folding chairs, I was not the pathetic, discarded wife. I was Sarah, who was learning to breathe again, one ragged inhale at a time. One evening, Marie gave us a challenge. "This week," she said, her gaze gentle but firm as it traveled to each of our faces, I want you to do one thing for 1 hour that is solely for you. Not for your kids, not for your job, not to clean your house or run errands. Something that even in the smallest way brings a flicker of something other than pain. It doesn't have to be joy. It could be curiosity or peace, or just a distraction that doesn't hurt. I drove home baffled. What did I like? For 2 decades, my likes had been woven into the fabric of us. Our favorite shows to binge watch, our weekend routines of farmers' markets and yard work, our restaurant choices, our vacation spots. I realized with a fresh wave of shame that I had no idea what I enjoyed alone. My identity had been so deeply fused that his departure felt like an amputation of myself. I wandered my quiet house that weekend, feeling like a stranger in my own life, an anthropologist studying the ruins of a lost civilization called the marriage. In the back of a hallway closet, under a pile of old blankets and a forgotten sewing project, my fingers brushed against a hard, rectangular case. I pulled it out, dust clouding the air in the afternoon light. It was my old acrylic paint set, a gift from my daughter in high school for a mother-daughter art class we never finished, barely used. I carried it to the kitchen table like an archaeologist with a fragile artifact. I opened the latch. The paints were hardened in their little pods, a rainbow of possibilities turned to stone. But there was a pad of blank, slightly yellowed paper underneath. I found a pencil in the junk drawer. I just started drawing lines, not a picture of anything, just lines, curves, shapes. I shaded one side. I smudged it with my finger, the graphite feeling gritty and real. An hour vanished. When I finally looked up, the light had changed. I looked down at the smudged, abstract, utterly meaningless page. And for the first time in over a year, I had not thought about him, the divorce, the loneliness, or the fear for a full 60 minutes. It was a vacation in a graphite gray world. That tiny, dust-covered kit became my lifeline, my secret rebellion against despair. The journey was agonizingly slow, a path of 2 steps forward and 1 step back into the quicksand of despair. I had to learn the most basic things again, like a child, but with the weight of an adult's consequences. How to manage the finances he had always handled, staring at spreadsheets until my eyes crossed with panic. How to fix a leaking faucet by watching a YouTube video on my phone, my hands shaking as I turned the wrench. How to eat a meal without feeling the emptiness of the opposite chair like a physical force, the silence chewing louder than any food. I had to face the mirror and see a woman whose eyes held a history of pain, to learn to meet her gaze and not look away in disgust. I started taking long walks in the nearby park, not for exercise, but to prove I could move through the world without crumbling. I would force myself to notice things. The stubborn crocus pushing through a crust of frost, the intricate architecture of a spider web jeweled with morning dew, the way the old oak tree was already forming new buds around the scar of the broken branch. These small, deliberate observations were like pennies dropped into the empty well of my soul, their value accumulating slowly, almost imperceptibly. A major turning point, a real test of my fledgling spine, came during a conflict with my daughter. She was planning her own 5th wedding anniversary party and was struggling with whether to invite her father and his new, much younger girlfriend. She called me, her voice tense and tearful, wanting my blessing to invite them, to keep the peace and not make things awkward. My old self, the peacemaker, the pleaser, the one who swallowed her own pain to make things easier for everyone else, leaped to the surface. The automatic words, "Of course, honey, it's fine. Do what you need to do," were on the tip of my tongue. But they tasted like ash. They felt like a betrayal of the woman who had survived the ice storm. I took a deep, shaky breath that sounded like wind in a cave. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "this is your celebration and you must do what feels right for your family. But I need to tell you my truth. It is not fine with me. It would hurt me deeply. I cannot be in the same room with them yet. I support your decision, but I also have to honor my own healing, which means I would not be able to attend if they are there." The silence on the line was terrifying, a void into which I had thrown my most fragile truth. I had drawn a boundary. I had chosen myself, and the world did not end. She cried, she was upset, she didn't understand at first, but we kept talking. We found a compromise later, a separate dinner, just our family. But in that moment, I met Sarah the protector, and she was strong. She loved her daughter enough to be honest, and she loved herself enough to say no. The rediscovered paint set led me to a community college night class listed in the continuing education catalog. Introduction to Watercolors for the Absolute Beginner. I was the oldest person in the room by at least 20 years, surrounded by giggling college students and young mothers seeking a hobby. My first attempts were muddy washes of color, frustrating and childish. The brush felt foreign in my hand, but I kept going. In the focused effort of mixing a cerulean blue with just a touch of burnt sienna, in the patient, gentle layering of a wash, my chattering, anxious mind would finally go quiet. The committee of fears in my head was dismissed. In that studio under the bright lights, I was not a divorcee. I was not a mother wrestling with guilt. I was a student. I was a creator, however clumsy. I began to paint my grief dark, swirling storms of pains gray and indigo on the paper. I painted my anger, slashes of alizarin crimson and black. And then, one day, I painted the ice storm. The dark blues and purples of that night, the shocking, brilliant slash of blue-white sparks, the suggestion of a solid, enduring tree trunk in the corner, its roots hinted at beneath the soil. When I finished, I sat back and cried, not the desperate sobs of before, but a quiet, cathartic release. For the first time, I had taken my pain and made it into something outside of myself. I had borne witness to my own survival and turned it into art. I had externalized the storm. Restoration did not come as a knight in shining armor, a sudden windfall, or a dramatic makeover. It did not come as a new romantic love, though that would enter my story much later, and differently, unexpectedly. Restoration came first as a slow, green shoot of self-respect breaking through the cracked concrete of my soul. It came in the ability to spend a whole Saturday entirely on my own whims, painting a terrible landscape, reading a novel in a bath until the water went cold, taking a long drive with the music blasting show tunes, and to feel not loneliness but a luxurious, quiet contentment. It came in looking at my budget spreadsheet at the end of the month and realizing with dawning pride that I was making it. I was paying my own bills. I was solvent. I was capable. The fear was still there, but it was now sharing a room with competence. It came in the form of new friendships forged in the fire of shared experience. My support group sisters became my warriors, my council of women. We celebrated small, monumental victories, a successful mediation session that didn't end in tears, a night slept through without nightmares, the first genuine, unforced laugh that came from the belly. We showed up with soup and strong shoulders and no judgment when one of us fell back into the pit of despair. We became a chosen family, a living testament to the fact that love is not a finite resource that disappears with one person. It multiplies, it expands, it finds new, unexpected vessels in the hearts of those who understand your scars. And then, a strange and gradual thing began to happen. The sharp, debilitating grief that once felt like a shard of glass in my heart softened into a steady, acknowledged presence, like the memory of a scar you trace with your finger. I could think of the good years, the love that was real and vibrant, without the acid bitterness of the end poisoning it all. I could separate the man I loved, the young father, the vulnerable patient, the ambitious partner, from the man who left. I learned to hold the complexity, a skill more delicate than any watercolor technique. The gratitude for my children, for the years of partnership, alongside the deep, valid hurt of betrayal. The black and white story of victim and villain dissolved into a nuanced, human landscape of two people who, for their own reasons, failed each other. Forgiveness, when it finally arrived years later, was not for him. It was for me. It was the decision to lay down the heavy, burning coal of my rage I had been clutching, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved the peace. I released him not to exonerate him, but to free myself from being his prisoner. Years have passed now. The woman who curled into a ball on that bed, who thought the branches fall was an omen of her end, feels like a dear, wounded sister I once knew and comforted. I still live in the same house, but it is no longer a museum of ghosts. It is filled with my asterisk art on the walls, some good, some wonderfully bad. It holds asterisk my asterisk favorite books stacked haphazardly on new shelves I built myself. It echoes with the vibrant, beautiful chaos of my grandchildren's toys when they visit, their laughter now the dominant spirit in the rooms. The silence, when it comes, is a comfortable, chosen quiet, a companion rather than a predator. I found love again in my 60s. His name is David, a kind, widowed history professor who understands that my heart is a mosaic, beautiful and whole, but with visible lines where it was once broken. We share time, travel, concerts, and a deep companionship built on conversations that last for hours. But we also maintain our own hard-won homes and identities. We are together because we want to be, not because we need to be. It is a love of choice, not dependency, and that makes all the difference. My restoration was not about going back. I could never go back to the woman I was before the marriage or even before the divorce. That woman was gone, fractured by the blow. My restoration was about the patient, often painful gathering of every shattered piece. The shard of mother, the sliver of librarian, the broken bit of lover, the dust of dreamer, the new, unexpected fragments of artist and survivor. And slowly, with God's grace as my mortar and my own stubborn, rediscovered spirit as the guiding hand, creating a new, more intricate, more compassionate, and far more interesting whole. The cracks are still there. I see them every day. But I have learned they are not flaws to be hidden. They are the evidence of the breaking and the brave, beautiful remaking. They are how the light finally got in. And now, sometimes, I feel that light shining back out.